I will highlight the issues and a few of the recommendations. The first issue, and probably the issue that's on most people's mind when we start talking about Latinos being counted in the census, is the way that information is shared. Latinos, regardless of immigration status, are concerned that their information will be shared with other governmental agencies. Specifically, many Latinos are concerned that cooperating with the census will make them either targets or identified by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement or police departments that are partnering with immigration enforcement officials. This concern not only affects people who are authorized or unauthorized to be in the United States, but because most of the families have a mixed immigration status, whether citizens get counted is influenced by how safe they feel in their communities. The second issue really focuses on the importance of the census count and how we focus on reapportionment. As I said sort of in the beginning, reapportionment and the focus on that particular issue obfuscates the importance of the census on funding that impacts the Latino community. The third issue is that not all limited English proficiency residents will be receiving a bilingual form. Approximately 13 million Spanish-English forms will be mailed out to areas where there are the largest number of Latinos. Yet almost 34 million people in the United States speak Spanish. The fourth issue is that the housing crisis and the economic trials that we're experiencing have decreased the wealth of Latinos and increased their mobility, and potentially increased their use of alternative housing, thus making people who were easier to count in previous censuses potentially more difficult to count in this census. The fifth issue is the difficulty of counting Latinos who are also engaged in agricultural or farm work. Many of you may or may not know that the U.S. Department of Agriculture actually engages in an agricultural census every 5 years. They also have been faced with many of the same issues that the decennial census is faced with when it comes to counting Latinos. Some of the recommendations that I'd like to highlight today are as follows. I think that one of the most important recommendations in this white paper is the suspension of immigration raids while enumerators are counting in the communities. Because the Immigration Enforcement Agency is a parallel agency to the Census Bureau, this recommendation is not actually aimed so much at the Census Bureau as it is at the Office of the President, as it would be his job to direct the immigration enforcement people to suspend raids. The immigration enforcement suspension would also include police departments who are engaged in assisting immigration officials in deportation and identification of people who are unauthorized to be here. The Census Bureau, the second recommendation that I'd like to highlight is that the Census Bureau and Spanish language broadcasting systems should develop a short TV program that would educate Spanish language viewers about the importance of the census and provide instructions so that Spanish language residents could successfully complete English language forms. The idea would be that these forms this program would cut across all Spanish language media, TV specifically, would happen all at the same time, probably 3 times. A morning program, an evening program, and a weekend program, so as to cover all the Latino community. Secondly, advertising campaigns in the Latino community should include information about the consequences of undercounts to programs that are most familiar and important to people in our community, such as education funding, Head Start, health services, job training. In addition, all Latino organizations should engage in a unified message or slogan in their census campaigns. Right now, many different Latino organizations, in an effort to be helpful to the Census Bureau, have engaged in their own slogans. So a unified message, much like we have a unified message in English, I think would eliminate some of the confusion about what we're actually talking about. Third, I think it's really important that we learn from the lessons of the immigration marches of 2006. They engaged Latino youth through peer-to-peer networks such as text messaging, Facebook, to educate them and engage them in being counted and making sure their families got counted. Finally, there are several other recommendations in this report. What's interesting to note is that 2010 is going to be a short form only. What we used to be known as the long form actually occurs in something that's now called the American Community Survey, which actually is sent to 3 million addresses annually. This is important to note because many of the issues that face our decennial census also face that American Community Survey. So now the issues about being undercounted not only affect us every 10 years, but they actually affect us annually. It's important for us to engage in a long-term campaign, helping the Latino community become familiar as youth about and understand and educated about the importance of being counted for the purposes of funding and representation.